Here in Australia, you're going to need an electric brake controller to tow any trailer over 2 tonnes. The conventional approach here involves hardwiring a controller to every vehicle tasked with towing such a trailer, and that gets kind of expensive. Especially if you've got one trailer, like a boat, a caravan, camper trailer, excavator, diesel generator, whatever. I mean, people tow all kinds of kooky stuff, and multiple vehicles potentially to tow that whatever with. You could be up for several hardwired brake controllers. And then when you upgrade to a new vehicle, you instantly need another one. Plus you need to pay for installation again. Would it not therefore be impossibly excellent if there were a better way to do this? This is the EB2 brake controller from Elecbrakes. Elecbrakes is an Aussie business on the New South Wales Central Coast. They've got integrated production, assembly and R&D in-house. They're legitimately an Aussie manufacturing innovator and success story. But you know what? Until I got tipped off about them, I'd never actually heard of Elecbrakes. This black box is the brain and it stays on the trailer. And if it's there, you do not need a brake controller inside the tow vehicle. It's simple but sophisticated. There's even an accelerometer inside which enables proportional braking. Plus, you get dynamic adaptation to hills built in. So, one trailer, one controller, and most handy dudes could install the EB2 easily. 4 self-drilling screws is really all it takes, and they're provided in the box. The braking response itself is very tunable. You can easily tweak it to suit your particular combination, plus there are 5 preset programs built in. Now this all sounds fine of course, but it's really not worth a blurt if the towing experience is terrible. And that's one of the reasons I drove up and visited the Elecbrakes factory, because a road test of something like this, which is critical but philosophically a bit of a departure from the norm, is kind of mandatory. So jump in their Ranger with me now, with one of their engineers' camper trailers slung out the back, and I'll jam an hour or so of first towing impressions in both the burbs and the bush into the next handful of minutes, and I'll tell you how it really feels to tow on an Elecbrakes EB2. This is my first test drive on the Elecbrakes EB2 brake controller, and I've been driving the car for about 40 minutes now. Okay, it's a Ranger towing a 1500 kilo camper trailer, and it's a really intuitive, easygoing process. In fact, you spend all your time doing what you should be doing, which is looking out around you at space and time and what's unfolding in and around the vehicle. You don't have to think too much about what the brake controller is actually doing. But if it is your first crack at this, what I would strongly recommend is that you play around a little bit with the minimum response setting, because what that'll do is when you touch the brake pedal, it'll just take all of the slack out of your particular trailer setup. So what you do is you tweak that number up or down so that the system responds exactly enough to take the slack out of the braking system, so that if you need to get harder on the brakes, there's no time delay. So it's worth playing with that setting. But basically, after that, you can tweak the gain. They call it the forward response, right? So that just really changes how quickly the system responds to you jamming the brakes on harder and harder. But it doesn't change the fundamental maximum braking performance of your trailer. And you can play around with that if you want, but I find it works just fine as it comes out of the box. One thing I can tell you, after having a bit of a crack in quite a few different scenarios now, we've been doing this loping along, driving on the bitumen, but we've also gone on plenty of unsealed road and done a few pretty steep descents down some potholed, not quite fire trail, sort of national park roads. The kind of thing that normal people do when they don't want to abuse their trailer. And the one thing I can tell you is that the engineers have done a really good job, because this process of hitting the brakes and slowing down, and you shouldn't have to think about that too hard when you drive. and you don't. You just drive normally, safely and conservatively, and the trailer functions just fine. The beauty, of course, of these electrically controlled braking systems is that they take all of that feedback out that you get in override brakes. You know, you can be driving along in override brakes and your head will be going backwards and forwards as you get in these feedback scenarios between the trailer and the tow vehicle. Well, you're just not getting that here. And the interaction between you putting your foot on the brake and the trailer and the system responding, your whole vehicle slowing down in one hit as a combination, like it's screwed together properly, it's really well done. Like, you can change your brake pressure and modulate this and that, and there's nothing that you have to do. There's no cognitive heavy lifting to compensate for some unintuitive behavior of the whole combination. So I think it's easier, I guess, as a reviewer if you've got a lot of stuff to criticize, but frankly, this is just a normal, refined driving experience with a 1,500 kilo trailer out the back. This is a classic case in point just here, right? Because we had a car just turning right in front of me and I had to figure out if I had enough room to get around it, and we'd been accelerating, had to get straight on the brakes, and that's the kind of normal driving experience that confuses control systems, because you're going from on the gas to on the brakes, and nobody was expecting that, least of all me. It would have been nice if that driver in front had probably indicated and braked a little earlier, whatever, doesn't matter. What matters is how the brake controller responds to that fairly normal, sort of mildly annoying evolution of the driving environment. And just then, rock solid, dude. Like, it just performed exactly the way a car would perform without a big trailer behind it. So you can't really ask for more than that, can you? One of the other really elegant things about the way this system is designed is that there's Bluetooth for the app, and there's Bluetooth for your phone, and there's Bluetooth for the remote. But the Bluetooth doesn't actually play any part in braking the trailer. That's all wired in, right? So even in the unlikely event that you lose Bluetooth connectivity between the box that's doing the brain sort of work with the braking and the interface here inside the cabin, that has absolutely no safety implication, and there's no dimension where that impacts on the braking performance of your combination. It's really cleverly thought out like that, and fail-safed. Another thing that makes this quite attractive to many buyers, I'm sure, is that all of the hardware stays on the trailer. That's with the EB2 brake controller. That's on the trailer, and it's kind of there forever, and you can change vehicles at will because the interface is just coming out of your phone, or it's connected to Bluetooth, right? There's no modification of the vehicle. And that means if you get rid of a vehicle in 18 months, you're not also throwing away $800 worth of investment in hardwired brake controller in the vehicle. And likewise, if you share the trailer with your brother or something, say you've got a boat and you co-share it with some significant other in your life, then the controller for the brakes is on the trailer. And that means anybody with the software can just jump into any car and then tow your trailer. So that's kind of elegant. All you have to do is plug the EB2 into the towing loom. It daisy chains into the existing plug, which is easy, and like I said, the user interface is via Bluetooth. The actual braking is controlled with hardwired connections, but the user interface, meaning the connection to you in the cabin, is Bluetooth. And you can manage that connection in multiple ways. You can do it straight from your smartphone in a cradle for legal compliance, obviously, but there's also the free Elecbrakes app for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So if your car has that, you can tune the brake response from the vehicle's infotainment screen. It's fully supported. You can even hit the override function to activate only the trailer brakes and thereby control any incidents of incipient sway. The third option is to use the Elecbrakes wireless remote to achieve exactly the same control, to tweak the settings or hit the override. Elecbrakes also makes a vehicle mount controller, which is called the VM1, but in this report I'm talking about the EB2, the one that goes on the trailer. There are two main settings to tune with the EB2. The first is the minimum brake response, to take the slack out, like the free play, when you just kiss the brake pedal. Think of it like the minimum activation threshold of the system. Taking out the slack improves the refinement and minimises the response time when you actually need to start slowing down. Just drive along somewhere safe and kiss the brakes at low speed, like, 20 or 30 k's an hour, and then make small upward changes incrementally to that minimum response setting until you can only just feel the trailer start to brake. And that should be about right. The second tunable setting is the brake response gain, which Elecbrakes calls the forward brake response, I think. It's the response when you start braking for real. You tweak that until you feel the vehicle and the trailer working together in an integrated way, in unison under brakes, in perfect harmony, like Fred and Ginger, or perhaps, Donald and Elon, 2025's great superpower bromance. Like I said, if the Bluetooth fails, right, or your phone dies or something like that, the trailer brakes are going to continue to operate properly and effectively. The brake performance of your combination does not in any way depend on the Bluetooth connection. But speaking of the wiring, when you turn your headlights on, that's going to power up the brain of the EB2. You can also speak, I guess, to someone who understands electrons and wires and things of that nature, and use the auxiliary circuit in the towing harness to power the EB2. It's fully compatible with that also. Anyway, with the brain of the EB2 awake, when you hit the brakes, the brake lights energise, obviously, and that jolts the EB2 into activating the trailer brakes based on your chosen forward response settings and data from the onboard accelerometer. And if you've got basic DIY skills, you can install the EB2 in just a few minutes. When you get your EB2 brake controller out of the box, it looks just like this, kind of like a modem, and it comes with these 4 self-drilling, self-tapping screws. You put one in each corner and attach them just like that to the inside of your drawbar, somewhere nice and safe. And then the cable that comes with the unit plugs into whatever adapter you need for your vehicle. So it'll be 7 pins or 12 or flat or round, but you got to get the right one, and that depends on the vehicle. But you connect the brain to the adapter, and then you connect the adapter to the plug that comes out of your trailer, and that only goes on one way because the earth pin is kind of only one way, and you'll always get it wrong the first time. And then you will struggle like I am now and finally jam it home. And then this has only one place to go, really, doesn't it? So you stick it in the vehicle and you're set up. So let's talk about who this is for. Essentially, I think it's salvation in a box for any social or business domain where there's towing involving a heavy trailer used by multiple vehicles. Like you and your brother sharing a boat, or Dad's got a caravan and you borrow that from him to take your family on holiday. In cases such as these and the 1,000 other variations, you only need one EB2 brake controller on the trailer. Thus, you save the cost of multiple controllers and multiple in-vehicle installations, which frankly is brilliant. You might have a boat and say you've got a diesel dual cab for work, but your other vehicle, like mum's taxi in the family, is a 300 series. Sometimes you take the boat out with your mates using your dual cab, but when you and the fam go boating, you haul it with the 300. Lots of people would do something like that. You only need one brake controller. Either vehicle can do the towing using the same controller, which remains installed on the trailer. And this is a significant saving. Ditto when you upgrade your vehicle. And let's face it, people typically hang on to boats and caravans longer then they hang on to the vehicles towing them. With an EB2, you still need just the one controller on the trailer, and you don't need to pay anyone to install it. Full credit to Elecbrakes for keeping the R&D, the manufacturing and the assembly in-house here in Australia. They run a lean but impressive shop. Like, they've got in-house propeller head engineers, 5 of them. This is not some made in China and hastily rebranded operation. And as you all know by now, I'm all about the engineered and made in Australia. That's kind of important. Elecbrakes propeller heads can walk straight out of their skunk works onto the factory floor, and they can build prototypes and then test them in the way that big engineering outfits with rigid structural boundaries simply cannot. In a car company, for example, the factory could be on a different continent to the R&D centre. Might be 6 time zones away. You might have to get on a plane and fly for 5 hours or something just to install some prototypical widget. Elecbrakes has CNC manufacturing in-house. They've got injection moulding and a surface mount printed circuit board production line. It's pretty sexy stuff if you're into production engineering. The chips and the accelerometers, the capacitors, whatever, all the digital widgets, they go on the PCBs in-house, and their functionality is tested in-house in Australia. This also means that they've got local support at the other end of the phone, not some chatbot on a server in, I don't know, mainland China, right? And the black box itself, after assembly, it gets filled with resin in-house and tested again, because they kind of heated it up to make the resin flow. So when it goes in the box and it ships to your place, it's a monolith and it's got full IP67 environment protection, which means it's dust-proof and also able to tolerate at least immersion in 1 metre of water for 30 minutes. Something's generally gone quite wrong, hasn't it, if you manage to do that in the field. Just important to know, I think, that your Elecbrakes EB2 is going to shrug off the heaviest rain and, of course, boat launches and river crossings and things of that nature. Plus, it's shockproof. If you've got a trailer towed by multiple vehicles, this is a terrific solution. And it's not just for recreation, you know. Plenty of businesses face this challenge also. It's fleets and plant and equipment, not just boats and vans and recreational towing. Elecbrakes has just told me that they will deploy sway control later this year as an integrated feature. And the best news there is the EB2 that you might buy today will be fully upgradable when sway control goes on sale. You won't have to buy some complete new unit. Yours is already future-proof. It'll be an over-the-air update deal, kind of like with Tesla, only without a crazy person in charge. So that's nice. Elecbrakes propeller heads are finalising their sway control system now. I talked to them about it in binary initially, then we switched to hexadecimal, which is even harder to understand if you're a bystander. They're in the final phase of testing for R&D now with sway control, and the unit you already own, or the one you buy today, is already compatible upwardly. The EB2 solves a real problem out there on the road, and if you grab one, you're supporting a quality Aussie manufacturing business, which, in my estimation, is really not a trivial thing to do these days.